every year.
There's a total disconnect now between the ruling group and the masses.
I hate psychology.
Clear out.
They're the same worm-like characters.
Analysts.
Fuck you with your stupid argument.
They should not bother us.
Democracy. All of this just works.
Vote for the generations who are coming.
Fully dynamic game engine.
A millennial video essayist.
Always support strength,
Constant craving.
and identity.
I haven't yearned. They are a disease of our time.
Clear them out. You're voting for what your grandfather and father fought for.
I sit and yearn.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. Another week has gone by, and we're back with another set of topics that have caught our eye this week. We might hit some demographics. We might talk about Israel, our most favored nation in the world, of course, and their struggles with the barbarians and Hezbollah. We're like 30 minutes in and I'm hitting all the keywords. Luddic Path, you got to stop me before I get us banned.
Stop, please. No, we need to sanitize the intro before we get pulled off the air. Hello, everyone.
How are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm doing fine. Settling nicely into the autumn weather. So we're going to do an episode about nothing this time. It's like Seinfeld.
Talk a bit about shoes, a bit
topics.
about plastic, whatever comes to mind, essentially.
Shoes, plastic, and betting, I think, and juice.
Yeah.
Oops.
And juice.
Sorry.
But in a good way.
Drop one in there.
Because they're being attacked.
That's not a good thing.
They're not being attacked. They're fearing for their safety. In an article I have found. So I think maybe we should just start with shoes.
I could try to share and hopefully
into the news. Yeah.
Technical issues here. So I'm dealing with the patriots on Twitter and the populist rights who are seeing some clear signs of decline in the Americas. So let's take a look here now.
They're turning European, is that it?
Yeah, they seem to. Okay. I'm having to choose tabs, so I have a lot of tabs open with various topics here. So we have a tweet here from Lost Nomad who says that Gen Z was raised by helicopter parents obsessed with control and rules. They now have unfortunately internalized this and projected onto themselves and others. So, okay, what is he responding to here? It's a new statistic from CBS News. The percentage who asks guests to remove shoes by age. And then we see in the bottom here, in the plus 75 brackets, only 7% asks people to remove shoes. For 45 to 64, it's 13%. 30 to 44, it's 35%. And in the lowest age bracket, the Zoomers, the 44, almost 50% of American Zoomers ask people to remove their shoes when they enter their homes. Which is, it's interesting. I didn't know that this was one of the kind of American flagships of freedom and kind of anti-safetyism, in a sense.
I know I heard about sort of, places in America where you don't take off your shoes when you go inside. But I wasn't aware that it was this important to them.
No, they actually keep their shoes on inside, and they also use carpeted tiles, which is a sort of incomprehensible combo.
What? I mean, if you have like stone tiles in your entire sort of like first floor, right? I can kind of get it.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Carpets.
The norm is carpets. And they keep their shoes on, so they stomp around with this stuff on their rugs, which are very hard to clean, and you can't just take them out either. So it's a bit of a strange combo. I mean, I think that if you bother to install these carpets, you at least have the joy of walking around in socks just to enjoy the texture of them. But
yeah, you have the carpets. Why?
But it's interesting. I never thought about it that much. I've always been sort of a feet nudist, and I enjoy walking barefoot. So I mean, I just wonder, like, most Americans just walk around with shoes all day. They just take them off when they go to sleep or something, I assume.
Yeah, you'd have to think that. I'm not sure if there's any Americans in the chat. Do you wear shoes like literally all day? And if so, I mean, they're gonna get stinky.
And I'm of course wondering what's causing the change here. Like, I mean, they're claiming, we can look at the initial tweet that he responded to here. There seems to be a sort of a thread. I haven't been digging too much into it, but here we have a Hickman who says the no shoes home, quote unquote, thing might be one of the dumbest trends to come to America in a long time. Nothing says welcome to rulesy place where you are being watched, quite like the shoes off thing. It was
I'm gonna study your feet if you come home to me.
It's literally 1984 when if they have to take off your shoes before you walk in. I'm sorry to sort of laugh at this. I just it's always been the norm where I live in Europe, and we don't have
it's so strange.
floors.
Yeah,
You generally have tiles, whether of some type of it's either wooden floors or some type of I don't know what the tile material is, some type of plastic linoleum floors sometimes. Yeah.
Or you might be using those like fake flooring where it looks like wood, but it's like some kind of plastic.
Yeah, that's usually what it is.
You cheapen out. But still, I mean, it's just respectful to not drag dirt into someone else's home, right? Disrespectful to do it. So you take off your shoes. I'm not sure like about the rest of the world. As far as I understood, pretty much all of Europe takes off their shoes. Vinyl flooring, yes, that's what I was referring to. I mean, if you look to Asia, I assume most of them take off their shoes too.
Yeah, they take off like everything before you get in. So I don't know if this is a peculiar thing. It would have been an interesting thing to look into. Say how people have been shot for less. There we have the Wall Street Journal heading. Here is why I'll be keeping my shoes on in your shoeless home. Yeah, this is the last stand of freedom. I mean, I get the guns, but I didn't know like the shoes were sort of the
that was the step on snake moment.
The last stand. I mean,
well, okay, hang on a moment. So roommate 00 says, I take off my shoes at home, but I would not require that of any guest. Why not? Is it because you're sort of infringing on their freedom? Is that the mindset? This is just as strange as when you guys got on our ass for like not inviting people over for dinner, right?
That's yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I just remember this, the Dave Chappelle show, where they have this one skit that's supposed to be like a recreation where you have it's Eddie Murphy's brother, Charlie Murphy, and he's talking about the times where he met Rick James. And they have this one skit where Rick James is walking in with this kind of plateau shoes that are muddy, and he sits in his $10,000 sofa and just kind of grinds his dirt into the sofa, and they beat him up for it. So I thought that if you have like expensive tiles or furniture and stuff, it would be a bit of a pain in the ass to have to clean that out every time. But I mean, we'll grant some charity here. Maybe it's because they use the car so much. Maybe it's because they're not walking anywhere, so their shoes never get dirty because they're always on some type of surface anyway, right? Or they're on. Yeah.
But even if you're still walking on asphalt, right? And there's going to be like gravel and just, unless you're sort of pulling up into some sort of suburbia where, there's some Mexican who's always keeping the yard clean, so that on your way from your car to your door, you're not stepping in like leaves, right?
That's the Steelman argument here, right? The most charitable interpretation that we have the Mexican house cleaner, so the driveway is always cleaned out. It's leaf blown, completely spotless, and you walk out of your four-wheeler onto the clean driveway, and then you go inside, and then you go back outside and into your car and into your own super Mexican clean driveway and into the house. And in that sense, your shoes are clean, so the house remains clean.
Or
and
you're
that's
African
kind of not an issue.
American and you take great pride in keeping your new like Air
Sne-
Jordans
sneak,
clean.
sneakers.
Yeah.
You have to show the Jordans off. Are you afraid that somebody will steal your Jordans if you walk
take
out of the
them
house?
off.
I do hate that stuff. If you ever go to parties, this also always seems to be an issue. Actually, if there's many people who show up at the party and people take their shoes off, and you come back drunk and you have to try to look at your shoes, the shoe pile. Yeah, and some people get really cheeky too. I've noticed that if you have like nice shoes, other people will put them on to go out and take smoke breaks and stuff. It's extremely
that always sucked. Yeah.
So keep some ugly shoes around, I think, for
and that's
for
a
those
fair
occasions.
argument against taking your shoes off. But still, I mean, that's a minor sort of faux pas versus, scraping rocks all over my hardwood floors, right?
Well, yeah, Mustisa will clean that up, I assume.
She
well,
won't,
I don't have.
I mean, you can't fix my floors if you rub rocks on them.
Well, yeah, or if you have the carpeted ones, I think that the carpeted tiles, I think it would just be the worst. Such a bad combo. I don't know. Maybe they have some sort of industrial stuff to clean that out. Some tech that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, some
3M
stuff.
Yeah, I don't have more to say on that. I just thought that was a funny little news story.
Yeah. Let's switch gears and like power slide into something a bit more serious. Because in my local paper this week, there were a feature on an old Jewish couple who are unfortunately fearing for their life. Reading the headlines and the introductory part, one moment, sorry.
Is he gone? Maybe I'll have to take over the commentary here. Let's see, couples fear for safety. I wonder if we are safe. So, I mean, the context of this is that.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No problem. You can go on.
Yes. So the sort of headline and everything, and the Ingress here made me think that maybe they're people are like trying to break into their home or something like that. But I mean, we have talked about sort of neuroticism before and how it sort of presents in some of these people, and I feel like this is a very typical example of this. So I'm just going to read this, and you can interrupt me whenever you want. The older Jewish couple has started locking their doors even when they are home. They're frightened by what they hear on the streets of Kristiansand. Now, Kristiansand is a small town in the south of Norway with about 80, 100,000 people or something like that. A prerequisite for the interview with the Friends of the Fatherland organization which is they're really just sort of botching the newspapers. So a prerequisite for the interview with the newspaper is that they're allowed to remain anonymous. There is so much hatred out there, says the Jewish woman in her 70s. Recently, the police, sort of the FBI basically, terrorist threat level Norway has been increased from moderate to high. Quote, it is primarily the threat to Jewish and Israeli targets that are further sharpened, they write. Israel is at war with Hamas and Hezbollah, and Friday was a day of reconciliation. Quote, several actors can look at such markings as symbol of terrorist acts. So Friday was like a marking, probably because of the October 7th.
7th of October, first anniversary.
Last year. So the threat assessment says that a lot of people can look at these markings as symbols of terrorist acts, which is what they're saying. Jews are looking at some 14-year-old protesting, for Palestine and fearing for their life, essentially. The couple themselves has not been subjected to any incidents, but the woman has started to lock their doors. She's now also staying away from social media. I do not comment on anything, and I barely dare to give anything a like. I get anxious, and I have that new threat assessment from the government in mind. She says. The man
you will
just,
never be as neurotic as a 70-year-old Jewess.
like, afraid to leave likes on a Facebook post because the Palestinians are going to come for you. I'm not quite sure about that one.
I do certainly think they are going to shit talk you or something, but I mean, for people who are just liking stuff, yeah, I doubt the threat level is that high. There's a lot of Zionist shit posting going on, and I think in Facebook and Twitter.
That is true. The man says that he reads newspapers on both sides of the conflict, and they both follow developments in the Middle East closely. They do have a foreign background, but they've lived in Norway for a long time. From their point of view, they believe that Norwegian society is increasingly anti-Semitic. The woman says Norway is the most anti-Semitic country in Europe. I never thought it would go as far as this. Now, we've covered this before, that Norway is sort of historically anti-Semitic out of just sort of, I guess you called it, libertarianism, or sorry, not just liberalism, right? A naivete almost.
Well, it is the kind of the globalist versus the Zionist thing that's going on, whereas the political class are the avowed globalists, and they don't like the Zionists because they don't want to play by the rules.
Yeah.
So it's really more. That's kind of how it works. And I mean, Norway doesn't even have an embassy anymore. I think the embassy to Israel is gone. So their relations is just completely in the toilet. I think we even surpassed Ireland for like a very bad relation to Israel. Which I mean, we did another episode on it, but this is something that has soured, right? From having a good relationship with Israel and just generationally, the interest and let's just say affinity for Israel and Norway have faded over time, and so has the kind of willingness to stick up for these people, or to sort of do things that will make them feel safe or would secure them in ways that you don't see other places, I think.
And especially, we did lead sort of the Oslo Accord, right? And that was a big prestige project for a lot of political class of Norway, and that sort of falling through, I think, did leave a bit of a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, and sort of have made them go like, well, if you don't want our help, then whatever, right? In terms of foreign policy.
Yeah. So the political classes just are not that into the Jews anymore, and you have the left, like the actual far left, who you could say they're anti-Semitic by proxy, right? Or if they are Arabs who are have come to Norway and vote for the Reds, they are just anti-Semitic, right? Straight up.
They're most likely anti-Semitic, yes.
Yeah, I mean, even if they call themselves anti-Semitic, I mean, it's generally like very serious for them. And then of course you have the leftists with the Palestine flags, and more of these kind of principled anti-Zionist types who can't shut up about it on social media. But it's really kind of the center's unwillingness to do extra favors for the Jewish community. That's at least that's my interpretation of it, is that, we'll say, like you see in the United States, we have people like Ron DeSantis who sort of bending backwards, standing on sticks to make the Jews comfortable in Florida. In Norway, there's just not a big willingness from the political class to do more than necessary. Even though they do spend resources on policing in terms of trying to keep them safe, but in terms of doing like proactive things legally and politically to stamp out the people who are critical of them, they do very little.
It's bare minimum, yeah. Let's see here. Norway's, okay. I never thought it would go as far as this. What are you afraid of? I mean, it would be disrespectful, but I really want to try to do like a Seinfeld's mom impression or something. A Lois Griffin voice. That someone would hurt us. That someone would hurt us or our family. I worry about our grandchildren, the woman says. And I mean, that's fair. I mean, she I mean, I respect her sort of feelings on this. There are no targets. There are no terror targets, or there are no terror targets among any of the synagogues in the region, is what the paper says. And then head of police security says, we have people and groups that support Israeli or Jewish interests in our districts, and we do recommend that they keep a low profile and a low threshold for reporting to the police if they experience inconveniences or abnormal activity. The threat assessment applies to all of Norway, and the region and Kristiansand does not stand out in this context. The Holocaust Center in Oslo measures anti-Semitic attitudes in the Norwegian population, and they have found that it has increased after several years of decline. This is something we've commented on as well. 11.5% of respondents have pronounced prejudices against Jews, the survey shows from this year. However, Norway is among the countries with a relatively small prevalence for traditional anti-Semitic attitudes, according to researcher Vibeke Mo. But the results indicate that more people than before believe that their views on Jews are negatively affected by the conflict. So, Israel does bad stuff, and then people like the Jews less. Is that?
Well, yeah.
Is that
So it is.
here?
And well, that's just been going on for a very, very long time.
Yep.
And they just don't have enough of a counterweight, I think, in Norway as they have in many other countries.
Let's see here. Something about this cylinder, which is a blessing in Jewish homes. I'm not sure what that is. The couple are secular Jews, but some symbols are to be seen in their apartment. The candle sort of stick, the 7 candles standing in the living room. The front door hangs a mezuzah, a small cylinder with text from the Torah written by a roaming rabbi. Great band name, by the way, roaming rabbi. Out on the street, they cannot be recognized as Jews. The woman has stopped wearing her little Star of David around her neck. Religion has never been important to me, but this is a hate that is showing up these days that is cruel. She says she no longer goes to town on Saturdays because she wants to avoid the permanent demonstrations, processions against the war in Gaza. So because I live near here, I know about this. Every Saturday, you can basically just book the town square for whatever you want to do. So there's usually on Saturdays, there's when you protest something or you're like against some sort of policy or something, you can have your little thing. And so a lot of the Reds and the more sort of activist class have been doing a sort of support the Palestinian people demonstration every Saturday for like half an hour or something. Maybe it goes on longer. The Palestinian Committee is behind this demonstration procession to show support for the Palestinian people. Quote, "Stop the occupation, stop the genocide. We demand a ceasefire now and that the government must do more. Israel needs to be sanctioned," is their call out on their Facebook page. The Jewish woman reacts strongly to these slogans she says she hears from the procession. Quote, "From the river to the sea, shouted by children together with their parents. This is about Jews leaving. It's frightening. I have children and grandchildren, and I wonder if we're safe." Now, I just want you to... She's saying that she no longer goes into town on Saturdays because, some parents and kids are sort of protesting in favor of Palestine. And, it's hard maybe to describe for people outside, but Norwegians generally aren't very vocal people in their day-to-day activities, and they don't really act like this isn't like thugs, right? This isn't organized in such a way that if this woman were to show up and walk by them, they would beat her. But that's the way she's sort of describing it.
Well, I think they have this, almost epigenetically inside of them anyway, to this kind of hyper sensitive alarm systems for this kind of stuff, just to pick up on the smallest thing that's going to happen to them. And I mean, mostly I think they would be safe anyway, considering if they're, a secular Jew can be a sort of confusing term because, as you showed, they're still going to use all of this kind of Jewish minutia that put these menorahs and all of these other things in their house. So secular doesn't always mean secular, and religious doesn't always mean religious. The line is not really clear if you're a part of an ethno-religious identity group in the way that they are.
It's certainly something that for people on the outside, it's difficult to know sort of which hat you're wearing at what point, right?
Yeah, but at least sort of from a physiognomy standpoint, I think they would be indistinguishable from regular people, as like if they're not wearing any symbolism or something. But I assume that they're sort of they're hearing the drumming and they're afraid that this is going to lead to pogroms or something
Something like
down
that,
the line, because it has in the past. So
fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of what it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do. In terms of the sentiment in Norway is not very positive, but I don't think they're like in terms of incidents per capita. I think they're relatively well off. I wouldn't imagine that it's you're seeing like actual violent incidents against Jews or property damage.
And the chance of that happening from ethnic Norwegians is incredibly low. Even the hard-on communists.
Yeah, no, I see that one. I assume they're more worried about the kind of Muslim immigrants. And
there's not a lot of that, in this town either. I mean, there are, I would say, probably a regular amount, but it's not like a critical mass like you would see in Oslo, which is a place where I'd more sort of be more aligned with why sort of police is more keen to protect the what do they call the synagogues, right?
Yeah, then they do have synagogues and larger amount of Muslim populations as well. So I could imagine that this could it could get heated.
Well,
I mean, there's already been some incidents of property damage there, and people like shooting at the synagogue, even though I don't think anybody's been killed, but at least the intent has been been shown. So it'll be interesting to see if any of them emigrate.
If you don't feel safe here, then leave. It's mad simple, yo. Well, if you have been watching us earlier talking about this, you would be aware that when this happened last year, and I believe since then, by the way he spoke, they have planes on standby ready to ship Jews back to Israel should they feel unsafe, right? Wasn't that what one of the Jewish leaders said?
It was something like that, and I guess kudos to them for being prepped. But I don't know if they're safer in Israel currently. If they're being bombed left and right. So it's not. They should go to Florida if they're not too afraid of hurricanes.
Live with Jerry Seinfeld's parents.
Yep.
The head of the Palestinian Committee in the region, Joran Onnesson, says that the slogans are not intended as any attack on Jews. We are not against Israelis or against Jews, but we are for Palestinians and their right to live freely. So we believe that the Israeli government must be stopped because they're undoubtedly engaged in a genocide. She mentions that they have both a Norwegian Israeli Jew and 2 Palestinians on their board, and say that she extends a hand to all Jews in the region. Quote, Jews in Norway are not to blame for what the Israeli government is doing. And it is sad that they feel unsafe in the city, but there are no Palestinian friends who accuse Jews of anything. And my advice is that they should connect with us, for we are for human dignity and for freedom, she says. Now here's a picture of the demonstration. This was last year in December, which most likely would be a bigger turnout than the sort of every week thing because of what happened, right? And the ongoing conflict in that sense. It sort of escalated around October, November, right? But you can see here, I mean, even though you could say there's more Muslims here, it's mostly just sort of older people and some like taking their kids. Like these people are not here to make Jews feel afraid.
Yeah, I mean they don't think about it that way, but
bring your kid. There's going to be waffles, and it's that kind of yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
No, I forgot it.
Oh, sorry. Let's see here. Her husband has worked in several places in Norway, and he says that he has experienced that it is quite difficult to speak positively about Israel. He believes his attitudes changed after Israel's military victories in 1967 and 1973. Well, that's kind of strange, isn't it? Why would the attitude towards the Israelis change after, their military operations?
Well, I mean, for the better or for the worse? I'm not really sure.
I think he means it for the worse.
Well, I thought a lot of these people were like impressed by this stuff. Like it was the the Yom
maybe.
Kippur Wars and these when Israel was being attacked
That's
and
fair.
they came out as an underdog. I mean, I thought that too. Like I mentioned it previously with the Lebanon pager attacks. That I mean, it's not kind of on the same level, but I think it was kind of a PR point in Israel's favor because people thought it was cool, you know,
Yeah, fair
as
enough.
opposed to the all the pictures of dead kids, all the videos of like these pagers being blown up. It had both a sort of comedic effect and a kind of okay, well that was smart actually.
Mhm.
So I mean, I recently got the news that Sinwar was killed as well, the leader of Hamas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So now Eric Stryker is gonna complain about human rights abuses and then hype the next guy. I mean, I'm sitting on Twitter and just like I'm watching some of these third positionist accounts, so they go through the same cope cycle every time, where it's they hype some like Hezbollah or Hamas leader who's going to be like the next big thing. We run some
Right.
propaganda for them, they get killed, and then they complain about human rights, and then they explain that it wasn't a big deal, and they start hyping the next guy. So I'm sad to see it's become a pattern. I'm already getting sick of seeing it. I'm wondering how many times this has happened already. I don't know if you're privy to some of the same stuff on your timeline, but I've
To
seen a
be
lot
fair,
of
my timeline is curated to avoid stuff like that on a much larger basis than yours, I believe. So no, I haven't seen it, but I can imagine it. What I usually do is that I go to your profile and see what you've been like replying and retweeting to. That's my window into a lot of that stuff.
Well, I only reply and retweet like a fraction of the kind of trash that I'm exposed to. I feel like Twitter is like being in a sewer in a sense. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff in the sewer, but it can be a little bit taxing on my mental health at times, because I don't try to create some kind of feed where I'm getting stuff that I like or only people that I like. I very much like try to actively just watch accounts I don't like to see what's actually being said there. But like it depends kind of on the time of the day. Like in the morning, for example, it's fucking horrible because like Moscow has like one time zone ahead of us. And they like the St. Petersburg and Moscow troll factories. They start like 1 hour ahead. So
arrived
when
at
I wake,
work.
yeah, when I wake up at like 7, they've been going for 1 hour. So it's just like all Russian propaganda on my timeline constantly. And
They
then
wake
after
up,
work,
there's another tie-up. Yeah.
after work, it's like the American disinfo train that starts up, right? Because they're like about 6 to 8 hours behind me. So
That's insanity. All right, let's keep going. The two believe that, not everyone is negative, but the atmosphere of the society was that one should criticize. Even when Israel withdrew and all Jews left Gaza in 2005, this was perceived negatively by Norwegians, he says. The two believe that Israel receives disproportionate criticism compared to other conflicts in the world. Do they? Compared to what? Like compared to how much they are sort of inserting themselves into our field of view with it. Are they receiving
well, compared to
disproportionate criticism?
other I don't. Well, I mean, they've been in the maybe if you take like a smaller time frame, and you say like, okay, you just look at Israel and look at some other stuff that's going on, but like the Israel stuff has been going on for so long,
Right.
and they do insert themselves into it quite a bit. I mean, they've not been shy, like the Jews in general, about inserting their own kind of persecution complexes into media and talking about this stuff in general. So it's not. I don't think it's that weird that they're getting that attention. But yeah, if you do look at it like you're just isolating these incidents in like say like a 1 week time frame, and you say, well, there's some genocide going on in Africa or something. Well, yeah,
sure,
I get it,
African
but
warlord is doing bullshit. But I mean, that's not what my tax money is going to, right? So
no, it's not really it doesn't occupy this kind of very special space that Israel does in the collective imagination. I think where it's kind of like it's kind of Western, but kind of not, and it's kind of a friend, but also an enemy. It's a very very peculiar place.
yeah. We cry just as much for the victims in Gaza, but if Israel puts down their weapons, they will be wiped out. It is the only country in the world to be criticized for defending itself. I mean,
I don't think so.
the word defending itself is, heavily implied here. But should it not be allowed to criticize? But should it not be okay to criticize the state of Israel's actions? Asks the reporter. What I hear on the street is anti-Semitism. Let the children live, they shout, as if Israel wants to kill children. Hamas used civilians as shields, and it is impossible that civilians are not hit then, he said. The man points to a strong and organized support for the Palestinians, but believes it is difficult for the Jews to express support for Israel without facing counter-reactions. The reporter asks, but are you considered an anti-Semite if you're against the war? If you ask it that way, then my answer is no, he says. The picture is more nuanced. I know many who are positive about Israel, but I know also those who do not know the historical perspective and quickly latch on to the current state. But far from everyone are actual anti-Semites, he says. And that's the end of the article. Now, I do have a huge back and forth between like a Danish author and like some theologist about Israel, but I'm not sure if we have time to go into that.
Well, yeah, I feel like it's like these never-ending discussions, right? That you could have about these historical events and who said what, and it gets a little bit tiresome.
One thing that was funny is that the Danish author, at some point, as a bit of a quip, says, he says that the way Israel is doing politics in Gaza is akin to the actions of the mid-centuries Germans, right? And the theologist responds, gives him like a big fact check. Actually, that argument is on the Holocaust Remembrance working definition of anti-Semitism. Is literally like one of their points is drawing comparisons of contemporary Israel policy to that of the mid-century Germans is like on the no-no list. So you can't make that argument.
What's it called? There's some kind of internet law about bringing up Hitler. Oh
yeah.
I don't remember. This Godwin's law, is
eventually,
it?
Yeah, something.
So
everyone eventually calls the other side Hitler or something.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's on the naughty list now.
It's on the official naughty list, so. But only when you do it for Israel, of course. Next up, I guess you're going to have.
Look a bit at the plastic, fantastic stuff.
I mean, you've been accused of being a contrarian, and sort of trying to be a. I guess what you're trying to be is a bit of a European supremacist in a way, and arguing for sort of some things are just good. Practice, and your latest one seems to be the incredibly annoying European bottle caps.
Well, it's I guess it's a bit of a bigger issue here, right? But here we have Peter Sweden 7, right? This is I don't know what you want to call it, the Swedish journalist, quote unquote. One of these like populist nationalist accounts on Twitter who posts more about based Hungary than he posts about Sweden. Most of the time, it's like these. I mean, I'm just mentioning this now. There's like, if there was some sort of betting thing, where I'm going to talk about betting later. If I could bet that this guy is getting money from Hungary, then I would bet I put a lot of money on it. I mean, I follow a lot of these Hungarian propaganda accounts on Twitter, and they have a certain pattern about like slogans they repeat and stuff. He posts a lot of that. He sort of like, do you support Hungary type posts? In Hungary, we have free tax credit, no income tax for kids and up. Do you support Viktor Orban? Do you support Hungary? And like, they just post that stuff over and over. But I mean, I've talked so much about these kind of agents and these grifters, but I just wanted to address this point because he's not the only one bringing it up. I've seen like our favorite RT contributor Einmiles Chong talking about this, and a lot of these other based bros But I'll just read here. He says, here in Europe, we are forced to drink from the bottles because of climate rules. They are terrible to drink from, and you poke your nose on the plastic cap every time. Doesn't this just look horrible? And then he posts the stand like a feather.
You know what this reads like?
Cap.
I mean, I kind of agree with him that they're incredibly annoying. So I'm kind of in disagreement with you. But that post reads like that North Korean defector woman. You know the meme?
Yeah, we're getting, because I made that one, by the way.
Okay, you made that meme.
So we're in the same headspace. Maybe you didn't get the I don't know, maybe you didn't see this one, but I actually posted this on the on my timeline here. In Europe, we are forced to drink from tethered bottle cap because of climate rules. I mean, okay. I'm just going to give my take here on why I think this is extremely retarded. The first one is that it's not that hard to just rip those things off or just turn the bottle. Like, I'm imagining this Peter Sweden guy as like either his nose is just gigantic, or he has like the IQ of a fish or something. Like he can't, like the fish who get their heads stuck in these kind of like plastic tires or something, and they just swim around with that the rest of their lives. They can't figure out how to turn the bottle caps because it's sort of a minor annoyance, right? But I mean, the actual origin of the reason Europe has these rules, like the climate rules, quote unquote, right? This is from the single-use plastics directive that came from the EU in 2019, right? And it's not, something it's not about CO2 emissions. It's not about carbon, which these are the typical complaints. If you have people who are climate skeptics or something, you talk about, well, there's no problem with like CO2 emissions or like carbon use is a sort of obsession or cultish. Like, this is a directive that was specifically issued from the EU to reduce microplastics in the ecosystem, which I assume if you're in that esoteric, populist bro space, this is stuff that they complain about pretty frequently. Like the sort of, the endocrine disruptors, like we're being screwed by our governments. They're putting microplastics in, like, I got microplastics in my balls and this kind of stuff that like, this is the reason that testosterone is declining and the sperm counts are going down. Men are weak or whatever, like this, the frogs are turning gay because of microplastics. So the EU says, okay, we need to reduce microplastics, and then these people start complaining. Like, it's just a standard kind of like raw egg nationalist type thing where he's for all this kind of health stuff, but as soon as like the EU or something like WEF or something suggests something to reduce the amount of plastics, they start complaining immediately. Like, that's one of the reasons I think many of these people are just paid agitators, because they're never interested in solutions. They just want to complain and agitate as loudly as possible. But I will read a little bit about like the directive itself, because it's not just about like tethered caps. It's sort of just like a general directive issued on how to try to reduce the total amount of microplastics that is used. There's a single-use plastics is what they're talking about. So there are 10 items specifically in the directive. Cotton bud sticks, like if you're using these cotton swabs in your ear, to try to replace those, sort of plastic single-use cutlery, for example. Like you're getting these, if you go to like a street food corner or something, you get like the plastic knife and fork you just throw out. So those are going to have to be replaced, and I've seen that already, is that they're being replaced with like bamboo or some other type like wooden material.
Yeah, and if you buy like, I mean, here, if you buy like a yogurt or something, right? You used to get like a small like plastic spoon, but now you get like a bamboo one.
Yeah, exactly, and that's part of the. I mean, we're not in the EU, but we're like in sort of the same zone in terms of the economic stuff, and Norway tends to be very compliant with these directives. So balloons and balloon sticks would be one. I'm not really a big balloon consumer, so I wouldn't really know, but I'm seeing less of. I've seen a lot less of these sort of helium balloons. I think that was for environmental reasons, because they tend to just, if they slip up, they'll just float.
I mean, I'm not sure if this was national, but I believe my town banned them on like our national holiday. or just outright, because
Yeah.
on our national holiday, you get like an influx of like Romani guys all hawking these helium balloons, and there'd be like weeks of cleanup after.
Yeah, they end up in the ocean, right? Usually because they just float in the air, and the wind takes it away, and they end up in the ocean. So food containers, like if you've gotten this kind of like styrofoam, this kebab containers, the white ones, so they're trying to get that removed and have it replaced with cardboard or something. Cups is like these single-use party cups. I'm not sure what the alternative is, if they have to use hard ones, glass, metals, beverage containers in general. Cigarette butts is mentioned here, plastic bags. And I've seen a push for this too as well, like trying to have like this multi-use bag, or just like what do you have, like an actual cloth bag instead of just using the single-use plastic,
like a tote bag.
And they have increased the price of plastic bags by quite a bit also. So I'm wondering if that's a part of the incentive to get people to do that. Let's see, packets and wrapping, and wet wipes and sanitary items. So again, I'm also not a big consumer of those, so I'm not sure how exactly that's impacted it, but it does make sense. I have noticed a lot of changes in the last 5 years in these kind of daily household items. Straws would have been another one, like say like the if you go to McDonald's and you try to use the plastic straw, then you get like a paper.
You get those horrible
paper straws.
Paper straws that break after like 2 sips of whatever you're drinking. I mean, you get those everywhere now, I think.
Yeah, but that's part of this directive in general, just trying to make people use less of it. And of course, there's initiatives in terms of like bottle recycling and plastic recycling, which I think Norway and Scandinavia is very big on that, and they've been that way for like 20 years with this kind of what do you call it, like the bottle system, where you get the cash back for giving the bottle. But they're trying to implement those programs in other countries. So I had some stats on. Let's see if I could find like the countries who were good at it and the countries who were bad at it. Let's see here. Can't find it now, but it does seem to be like I think France and the Netherlands are probably on top in terms of implementing these measures. I mean, the Netherlands generally are very forward with this kind of stuff. They even have like this kind of, I mean, they're really doing the you'll own nothing and you'll be happy stuff, right? With the they're leasing everything, right? It seems to be the model in the Netherlands and Belgium, is that you lease like house materials and lighting and this kind of stuff. Like everything is like this kind of.
Oh, really?
Lease. Yeah, it's like the AWS cloud infrastructure and stuff. Like that's become the model for almost everything.
Jesus.
In those countries, so it's like they'll have tracked a lot of the materials in your house so that you can reuse it, or the stuff. So much of the stuff that you have is just kind of you're renting it and you're paying just progressively to have it in a sense. So it's really lighting as a service, for example, seems to be very popular.
That seems very strange to me.
It is a little bit weird, but I think they've been, they're generally quite ahead on implementing a lot of these things. So among the laggards, I think Italy seems to struggle with implementing things. Romania and some of these like former Bulgaria, some like these crustier, I would say, former Soviet countries. So,
right.
I mean, again, because you're seeing these, like the way these dialogues go on Twitter is that people like Einmals Chong will sit and try to use it as a sort of dunk against Europe, right? That they, America is sending rockets to the moon, like with Musk's, they did it this week. He was sending the rocket out and he was able to catch the rocket. It was quite impressive to see. With one of these stations, I don't know the technical language for it, but it's like, oh, this is what the United States does, and then Europe, it's like the tethered bottle cap. That's the meme that they roll out. So Europe is like just what do you say? The USA innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates. That's the joke. But again, microplastics is a problem, right? Is that controversial? I mean, even if you're like generally a climate skeptic, it should be sort of a good thing that you could you're able to implement these things on say across multiple European countries. Because I mean, even like with the United States, and I think I've talked about it before, the issue of brain drain from Europe to the US, how I think it's a bit of a bummer. But part of the reason why that happens is because of overregulation, right? Overregulation and the lack of kind of what you'd consider like the streamlined economy across Europe. So the both that European countries are too regulated and that they're regulated differently depending on the country, that makes it difficult to scale businesses. That's why you don't have these these kind of mega corporations in Europe, and it's very difficult for them to, like, say you make something that's a success in Sweden or something, and you want to scale out to Finland and in the United Kingdom. It's difficult because of varying regulations. So the market, it's not like the US market where you can just the stuff that works in one state is going to work in another state, and the taxes. I think it's a lot better for corporations in general. So, but I mean, in a sense, you could think of the stuff that they hate, EU and WEF and that kind of stuff, is a kind of attempt to address that problem. But they still hate it, right? So, I mean, it's very difficult to sort of understand where, like, when it comes to actual solutions, what a lot of these.
Well, with the bottle caps specifically, then, I mean, is wayward bottle caps such a big problem in the EU generally?
Well, I mean, I thought you could just do a thought experiment, like say like 1 in 20 people throw out the bottle caps. Didn't you? I thought you had like one of these Norwegian Reddit sites where the people were talking about like how hard it was because they can't just like throw the bottle cap out of the window of their cars after they put in the new designs.
I guess maybe,
but say that people are actually dropping them or have these kind of plastic pieces that just sort of fall off and they throw out. If you consider just the amount of bottles that are produced and consumed in Europe in just one day, because it is like one of the richest parts of the world, you're talking like millions. Let's say I had some ballpark numbers, but let's say I estimate that it's about like 6 or 7 million bottles that are bought in the EU countries in a day, and like 1 of 20, like say like 5% of them end up in nature. I mean, it's quite a lot, and over a perspective of 5 years, this is a considerable reduction in microplastic waste that doesn't go into the ecosystem.
Sure.
With actually what I consider quite minimal invasiveness into your private life. I mean, you might think it's a little bit annoying, but
that's cool for the EU, right? But I mean, it might be a trite argument. It's not really going to have that big of an impact when like China and Africa is just throwing away heaps and heaps of plastic at any like moment in time.
Yeah, but what are we going to do about them, right? And the
well, didn't you listen
to
the Boomer guy last stream? I mean, if Trump only allied with Russia, they could just take out China.
That's the argument, right? But there is a per capita argument here as well, right? I think a lot of these people, they like to use the per capita with the crime stuff, but they don't like to use the per capita with the plastic waste stuff.
Sure.
So I think that's generally
what has a lot higher per capita plastic waste than.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more of the Chinese people for sure, but if you look at like total plastic waste per capita in the EU, it's way higher than these poor countries. So that would be sort of the counter arguments. The use per capita is way higher, and like we can actually do something about that. It's not we don't have direct control over China or some of these other countries. So,
I'm happy with keeping sort of the microplastics out of my water supply. That's fine, right?
Yeah, your forests and your water supplies and whatever. I mean, as well as like other food regulation things that you have in Europe in general. That does seem to help the food in general. So yeah, I just find the sentiment a little bit on the weird side with some of these people who
I still stand though that the bottle cap thing is really annoying.
It has to go for some people. It's the shoes inside. For other people, it's the bottle cap. But but I think we've covered that one. So it's the last. It's one last thing that I wanted to look at that I thought was
sure. And then maybe we'll have a a check on some demographics if we have the time.
I thought instead of doing questions, we would just listen to Andrea Bocelli or something for half an hour and vibe a little bit. So
you wanted to talk about betting and politics and polls?
Yeah, no,
right?
it's just like this weird thing that I've been looking at a little bit today, and so that some people seem to be taking note of. So I have a tweet from Steven Crowder. I'll share it here. So we've talked about the American election and the polling and like what exactly is going on here. So the polling has improved for Donald Trump in like the last 2 weeks to the point where now it's very close. It's like almost 50-50. I mean, it's been within, if you say that it's like a 4% margin of error at any time, then it's always been neck and neck. But now it's like actually, it seems to be completely evening out, even in the swing states. So there are sort of margins that are like 0.2 to 0.1%. And that's what you're getting in the polling, and you're getting in like the Nate Silver models and the 538 and the like the Rasmussens that are very close. But people are pointing out that the betting market seems to be going crazy for Trump. So here's Steven Crowder saying at this point it seems almost fishy. No one has seen a lead like this in recent history. So polling market is the one that I think, at least in right-wing spaces, they've been citing the most, even when Trump was down in the polls, because Trump was still like doing as good or better in polling market. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's an interesting betting site. It seems to be the one that's the most favorable toward Trump, and it's also the one that's sort of owned by the broligarchs, or the like it's the Coinbase people and the crypto bros who own this. And the other weird thing about it is that Americans can't use this, because of crypto regulations. So if you're an American citizen, you can't actually you can't actually bet on this one. So it's coming from other places as well. And the question that's being raised is like, why is it like this? Why it's just going at like 60 and up for Trump, where he seems to have like 1/3, sort of 2/3 of a chance to win here, when it's like 50-50 in all of the polls. So there's some theories that I've heard floated around. Like, I mean, with Crowder, it's like he thinks it's fishy because you have the general, I guess, sort of conservative, anti-polling, anti-numbers kind of thinking, is that it's always rigged to make them lose, right? I don't know if I talked about this. Or
Crowder is Crowder is saying that polling market is rigged to make Trump lose by making it so that Trump looks like winning.
I think that's sort of, if you're reading between the lines, that's kind of implied just based on previous statements that and sentiments in the conservative sphere, where they, because I guess they took it from the 2016 election, right, where Hillary was ahead and she was projected to win, and then Trump won. So they've sort of concluded that.
So whenever you see a number, you assume the opposite number. And
well, they've concluded more or less that it depends on who you ask, right? But that the polls are demoralization weapons from the liberal establishment or something. It like, again, I'm just like characterizing it very generally, that when you're reading something, there's always some, like, they're trying to demoralize you, for example, by saying that Kamala Harris has a lead on Trump, so you shouldn't trust that. But if you get the opposite, so say in this case where Trump seems to have a disproportionate lead over Kamala Harris, then they're trying to make you apathetic or something. Like, yeah, you can just stay home because it's in the bag for Trump. So it doesn't matter which one is in the lead. They always seem to think that numbers are kind of skewed to make them lose. which is really why, I mean, it's just on how you interpret these things, where because there's like just two candidates, and the numbers could be in your favor, against your favor. I mean, it's whether or not you think these are weaponized. It just depends on how people react to it. I mean, if your candidate is down, you could react to it by, voting harder, I guess in aggregate. Or if your candidate's up, you could react to it by being apathetic, or you could do the opposite. Whereas you feel demoralized because your candidate is down and you don't choose to vote. So, I mean, I've tried to prod people on explaining exactly how they think the polling is demoralizing them deliberately, and I don't find it very compelling for that reason. I'm more inclined to think that it's has more to do with the way the polls are structured and the people they're bringing in and not bringing in, and they change that, right? You see, they change it, every election, because if they made a mistake the previous one, they're trying to get it more correct this time. And people have commented on the polls that they favored Biden stronger than how much he won in 2020. They favored Hillary too much, but in saying like the midterm polls in 2022, they seem to favor Republicans to have like a complete landslide, which didn't happen. So some people are suspecting that they're actually kind of overcounting Republican voters by this kind of using what they call a sort of reliable voter metric.
Right.
Where you're looking at sort of people who have voted before, and like the more times they have voted before, the more you count them, in a sense. That's how it's weighed. So that seems to favor more of these kind of regular, let's say like the regular like white male demographic a lot more than some of the more like flakier minority demographics. Whereas like the cope on the liberal side now is that even though like Harris might be going down in the polls, they actually believe that there are many minorities and women who are going to show up as first-time voters who are kind of undercounted in the polling, because and that's how it's actually going to be like a Democrat landslide because of all these like undercounted female voters, in a sense. I don't know if I believe that either, but that's what's going on their side. The other theory I've seen with this polymarket stuff is that it's really because of Elon Musk's that's using this as like a kind of pump and dump scheme, that he's hyping Trump on the platform, and that's where people are going in. Just they keep voting for him,
pumping to just make money.
And they're actually going to make money on Kamala or something, which is I don't know about that one either. A third theory that I heard,
that depends on how polymarket specifically works, like how they do the odds, right? Because that might not be even in the creator's power, considering
I think
some betting sites, they literally can't do that because that's part of sort of like if they could, no one would trust them, right?
But isn't it the more people who buy the shares or who buy the tickets, the better the odds?
I think that depends on the individual betting sites, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe I don't know the algorithm behind it, but I would assume that if you get a surge of confidence in Trump, but people are going and just buying Trump tickets, that his chances goes up. That's part of what the betting markets are accounting for. The third theory I heard is that people believe that Trump has some sort of plan to flip the election, even if he loses by, let's say, like a margin of like 5 electoral votes.
Yeah, no,
Or
sorry.
like
Polymarket seems to be. Sorry, I just Googled it to get an overview. Polymarket seems to be just like a free-for-all platform. Like someone can create the standing of Trump versus Kamala as a polymarket sort of odds, and then it's real time based on just share prices on buying and selling. So this is purely yes, this is open to pumping and dumping, as you said.
So people are pumping Trump in a sense, like but yeah, the last theory is that the alpha, what you consider like the alpha investors, believe that Trump has some sort of scheme ready to cook, in a sense, to account for essentially like he has some kind of the lawyers ready and stuff to flip. Essentially, if it's closed, then he's going to bring the lawyers in to try to flip it, in a sense, and then he has like the machine ready for that, and that they have some kind of inside knowledge about how that's going to work. So even if say like Kamala wins by like a tiny margin, then Trump has some scheme ready to flip that. That's the third theory I've heard. So again, I'm not sure. It's going to be interesting to see, but I just see it's sort of a weird development to see that there's this sort of this big of a difference between the betting markets, because it's not just here on Polymarket either. I checked on Betson, which is I think it's the most used for Scandinavia, and it also seems to favor Trump by a much bigger margin than the actual polls. But yeah,
interesting.
I don't have anything else.
Yeah, no worries. But it's interesting that yeah, I guess maybe someone is just pumping and dumping this, or it might be that the polls are wrong yet again. I mean, maybe they all watched JD Vance like we did and had a 180 and are now, full on MAGA people.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's another theory as well. If you're looking at people that are believing that Kamala is doing more appearances and they're not doing great. She was on Fox News with, I think it was Brett Baer or something. I guess it's a brave thing to do, but the interview was adversarial, and I don't think she won over any new voters on that one. It was sort of a lot of difficult questions, and I don't think she answered in a way that was satisfying for Fox News viewers in general. And she's set to go on Joe Rogan as well. He generally doesn't ask hard questions anyway, but it's
yeah, that's
it's
right.
yeah.
She's going on Joe Rogan. Yeah. Which didn't we look at the Spotify thing? Like Joe Rogan is like the top podcast in the US by numbers.
He is. So it looks like he's going to have both on. He was very reserved about having Donald Trump on. We talked about that previously, that he was like, yeah, I'm not going to have Trump on. I'm only going to have RFK or something. But if he's now in a situation where he's going to do both candidates, then I guess it's fair. It also might be like his last chance ever to interview Trump on anything like this. So
yeah, might as well get him while the getting's good.
But yeah, I mean, about the sort of the momentum, I think Vance is very good. I think he's generally getting better at doing interviews and is doing a lot of adversarial stuff. Kamala seems to be struggling a little bit, and I think a lot of Trump's campaign is good apart from Trump himself, who just seems to be getting worse. I'm just listening to interviews with him, and it like, to me, it seems to be an age thing. He seems to be getting really tired and kind of not really that.
I mean, it might be just sort of the age plus sort of the campaign machine is just tearing on him, like wearing on him, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would happen to anybody,
a lot of work.
I think, but it's it gets more visible the older you get, so it's difficult to kind of keep the same speed the sort of breakneck pace that I was doing in 2016.
So I do kind of see how after the debate, I mean, you mentioned that a lot of commentators in the EU said that sort of Vance was wasted on Trump.
Yeah,
that looking ahead, whether or not we get Trump the next 4 years, Vance might be someone to watch in the future, right?
Yeah, I think so too. He's able to at least rhetorically deliver that message, and he seems very, very good at adapting to new things. So yeah, he's probably the guy to watch in the future.
All right, so we're gonna end this episode off with just a read through of an article from a professor of demography in Norway, who is commenting on sort of the fear of demographic collapse, because you've done some research on this and recently did a presentation on a lot of this stuff recently, Pat. So maybe you have some comments in addition to what this guy has to say.
I did read it. It's a short article, so I could just you can read it and I'll just comment on it.
Yeah. Newspaper readers may get the impression that there's a significant risk of demographic collapse in Norway. The starting point for the gloom is that, quote, collected fertility rate, or I guess compounded fertility rate in Norway is now 1.4. And it is also shown that this figure is only 0.7 in South Korea, which is, a big oof. Which means that for anyone who is, well, he says it here, simplified, we can say that if women in a population age on average have 1.4 children during their lifetime, there's constant mortality and no net migration. Each generation will be 32% less than the previous one. So essentially, you need reproduction level, which is 2.5, something like that, because you need every woman to basically have 2 kids and then account for, if people die or whatever. So you need like 2.6. So someone like South Korea is really in the hole when it comes to demographics, because they're really sort of just running off a cliff generationally in that sense. Like when I guess people who are 50 now then or something die, that generation die off, the Gen X crowd dies off in South Korea, it's going to be like a huge dip of population.
I can't bleed. I can't bleed.
This means that Norway's population will be 32% smaller over the course of 30 years. So in 90 years, or 3 generations, it will be 69% less. If we extend this calculation exercise, the Norwegian population will be gone in 1,000 years. In periods of increasing birth rate, as we have now, however, the overall fertility rate is much lower than the number of children women get during their lifetime. A good example is that the collected fertility rate or compounded fertility rate in 1983 was at a then record low of 1.66. While all birth calls, I guess, records were then of childbearing age. I'm not sure what this is in translation. It ended up with more than 2 children on average. Okay, so he's saying that the fertility rate was at a record low, but when you do all the calculations of women at childbearing age, you end up with more than 2 children on average.
Yeah, this is what I didn't understand, right? And I tried to Google this as well. That I mean, the fertility rate is the amount of children in their lifetime.
Oh yeah,
At least that's what I've been working with. Yeah, and so I don't understand like what he means. It seems to me, it seems like he believes that the 1.4 number is how many women they have between 19 to 35 or something. Whereas he said that if you count for like up until 45, because there are more women having kids later and maybe using reproductive technologies like in vitro fertilization, then it's actually higher if you account for that. But it seems I thought they were already accounting for that. That was my working assumption. I didn't know that they was capping off at it was sort of capping off at 35 or 40 or something. So that's
it does make sense to not account for women in menopause when you're sort of projecting ahead, right?
Yeah, I of course I thought it was in the lifetime. I could try to Google fertility.
Women who were 45 years old last year, meaning they were born in 1978, had 1.9 children after a fall from 2.05 to 2.10 among those born 15 to 30 years earlier, meaning that, a woman who was born in like 1958 or maybe 1968. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm looking at Wikipedia here as an expert, and so it seems like you have something that's called a birth rate and something that's called a total fertility rate. So total fertility is over the lifetime, and birth rate is something that seems to be capped within a certain period of time, right? So he says that don't be a doomer, right? If you look at the actual fertility, total fertility, accounting for older mothers, it's actually a lot better than the other thing. But then the question comes up that isn't there also a point where it becomes a problem, like if they get too old, because let's say you have a fertility rate of 1.5, but people on average are having kids when they're 20 years old. Then you're going to have a lot more people than if people are having kids on the average when they're 30, for example. So if they're reproducing faster, then
you could also argue that sort of the resources that goes into producing each child is greater the older the woman becomes, right?
Yeah, I think so, and there might be dysgenic effects as far as risks of mental problems and like Down syndrome, things like that when the mother gets too old. So there are externalities to this.
Yep. So I guess what he was referring to was the total fertility rate, not the overall fertility rate, which is what was the translation was. Collected fertility rate. Okay. Even greater challenges. It is likely that with a continued decline, longer schooling, more economic uncertainty, higher house prices, stronger interest in a type of life expression that is difficult to reconcile with having children, and the increased use of dating apps and much more could contribute to further increase in both childlessness and age at first cohabitation and then first birth. First cohabitation and first birth being, of course, when you get together with someone and then have your child, as sort of statistical pinpoints. So in your research, Ludwig, I seem to recall that you told me that the thing that has the most impact and almost only impact is schooling. The more education you get, the less kids you have.
Yeah, females plus education equals less fertility. This is just true for everyone. And I've tweeted a little bit about this as well, but it's something that I made the joke that I wish I could, take most like right-wing people and strap them into the Ludvigo, the Clockwork Orange chair, and prop their eyes open with the matchsticks, and just like make them see that it's really about you get modernization, you get modernity, then you get education, and you get women into education. And when they start getting into higher education, the fertility rate drops without exception. Like maybe Israel is able to pull off something
Yeah, and
different,
you showed
but
me you showed me that the Ludovico machine was sort of the. You had like a quote from Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore as well, right? He said something like that as well.
yeah, I mean, Lee Kuan Yew basically said that it's like, okay, this people just have different priorities when you get to this stage. Trying to pour a bunch of money into these pro-natalist programs, it's almost just like a waste of time. And if he was still, leading Singapore, he would just like do 2 years of this kind of Hungarian style pro-natalist policies just to prove that it doesn't work. In a sense, that's kind of his attitude. He just, okay, I'm just going to do 2 years of really generous policies to show that it doesn't actually have any effect.
Yeah.
And it's not entirely true. I mean, you see that it has a marginal effect in the countries that try to accommodate for childcare and maternity leave are doing slightly better than those who aren't. Like the absolute chasm of birth rates is like the Southern European countries, who actually do have much more of what you consider like a conservative family model, whether it's like Italy, Spain, those countries, Greece. Absolutely, like in Europe, those are just really tanking out in terms of fertility. And the Asian tigers are really bad as well, like Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, these China as well. Surprisingly, even though it's not even fully modernized.
That's partially politics, though, isn't it, with the one-child policy?
It is partially what the one-child policy, but it's also something that would have happened naturally as well. That's kind of the interesting thing about China, is that they aggressively pursued the one-child policy for 35 years. But a lot of that could have happened naturally if they just allowed modernization to occur. And even during the one-child policy, there was still a fertility rate higher than 1, right? They had maybe like 1.5 or something, because some people paid a penalty or something. They had to pay extra to have those kids. It's still something that reliably happens, even in Muslim countries. Like, I didn't talk about that in my presentation, but you look at the modernized Muslim countries, and I'm talking about Iran, Turkey, and Lebanon, and they all have fertility rates below 2.1. Like, I think Iran is the home of like the biggest condom factory in the world, right? They're also like Tehran. Iran is like the world capital of transgender surgery, but that's another another story. But again, like it's really for like this sort of like the white Muslim copers. They should just look at the data, unless.
These changes can also lessen the likelihood of having more than one child, and not just because of the higher birth age. Of course, it cannot be ruled out that the child count, meaning how many children are actually being born, eventually could come all the way down to 1.4, but it does not seem very likely from the experience of other countries. No European country currently has such a low child count at age 45 as 1.4, but it is 1.5 in Germany, for example. Where it has been much more difficult than in Norway for both parents to have a living wage work while the children are small. In Japan, the child count is slightly less than 1.5, and it probably falls pretty soon below 1.4 in South Korea, where the total fertility rate is now on a global bottom level. In these two countries, parents face an even greater challenges, partly due to long working days, responsibility for the elderly, and follow-up of children's demanding schooling, which we have covered on our Korea episode with Nomad. Extremely far ahead in time, if the child count for Norwegian women should remain between 1.75 and 190, something we cannot be sure of, calculations such as above show that after 90 years without net immigration, there is a population reduction of 22 to 39%, and not 69% with a child count number of 1.4. In our first 90 years, the reduction would be less because now we have a fairly young population after all. The Central Bureau of Statistics takes this into account in their forecasts.
Well, our population is not that young. I mean, compared to other people, if you go look at the
It is
average
not.
age in Norway,
Yeah.
it's I don't know what he means by young in general. We're younger than Japan, but
Yeah,
I
just
mean, I
barely.
think we're close to like 39, 40 or something.
Yeah.
Median age. So
In the very long run, however, we go against annihilation, even if the child number is 1.75 to 190, just like with any other child number under 2.06. While all higher child numbers provide sustained growth and after a long time an absurdly large population. So this is a bit of a rustling pill, I guess, where it sort of levels out more than it's falling if you have a long enough tail. But such forecasts are extremely far into the future and with constant fertility and without immigration, which may not be that interesting. So that's all in this article. I'm sorry, Ludwig, but I'm going to have to get going, actually. So it's time that we round off this episode of The Longhouse.
no, I think we're on time. But yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in. It's a joy to do the podcast. And I'll just shill my YouTube channel again. You can go on LPTV. Yeah. I'll try to put out some more content this week. So maybe I'll see you there. Have a good night.
Yeah, if you want to listen to Ludwig Path's sort of off-the-cuff takes, I suppose, you have like a review of the new Joker movie, things like that. You can check that out. I'm posting the link in the chat. Other than that, you can follow me on Twitter, of course, if you want to do that. Remember to like and comment and do all that good stuff. Helps the algorithm a bit and keeps the lights on, as it were. We will see you next week. And until then, have a good evening, a good weekend, and we'll be here next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah.